Hello everyone, welcome to News Mongolia on MNB World. It's Friday, October 14th. I'm Batsir Namshir. And for our top stories, funding for prescription discount increased by 22.7 billion Mongolian turus in 2023 budget. The Speaker of Parliament departs for Turkey. Men become victims of abuse more common than you think. For other news, stay tuned. Funding for the prescription discount increased by 22.7 billion Mongolian turks in the next year's budget. The budget revenue of the Health Insurance Fund for 2023 is estimated to be 1.4 trillion MNT.
62% of the income of the Health Insurance Fund, or approximately 914.3 billion MNT, is expected to come from the state budget. The state will pay the cost of 687.4 billion MNT as specified in Article 24 of the Law on Health and Finance and Support Care Services. It also budgeted 226.9 billion MNT, which is an increase of 63.2 billion MNT, to pay the health insurance for the citizens that the government covers in accordance with Article 8 of the Law on Health Insurance in connection with the increase of the minimum wage. Moreover, 1.3 trillion MNT had been budgeted for the cost of purchasing assistance and services from the Health Insurance Fund. An estimate of 250.9 billion MNT has been allocated to primary healthcare institutions, which is calculated to be twice as much as the funding provided per citizen. Medication for children with cerebral palsy and seizures are included in prescription discounts under the health insurance law. Also, to improve access and control the cost of drugs under the government's responsibility, the funding for a prescription discount has been budgeted at 89.9 billion MNT, which is an increase of by 22.7 billion MNT.
Despite our best efforts at equality, many gender stereotypes continue to linger on. For example, traditionally, men are to be masculine and to display attributes such as strength, power, and competitiveness, and less openly display any emotions. However, while all gender generalizations are problematic, some of these beliefs cause more damage than others. The gender stereotype that we are going to debunk today is the idea that men cannot be victims of domestic abuse. Men being abused is often overlooked by society. The idea that men can be victims of often laughed at or even ignored. However, focusing on the abuse of women is damaging to men of all ages, backgrounds, and sexualities.
I don't think Mongolian men are being abused or are becoming victims of the abuse, or maybe we're just not well informed about this issue. I don't think only women can become victims of abuse. The recent example is Hollywood actor Johnny Depp's case. I think they are not vocal about their issue due to the socially acceptable norms. Maybe they get abused psychologically rather than physically.
It's time to acknowledge why we don't take male domestic abuse seriously and how it hurts people of all genders and sexualities. Studies reveal that men usually suffer from psychological and financial abuse rather than physical abuse. There are many factors that play into why men don't come forward to talk about domestic abuse. Unfortunately, many of these reasons relate to a society that doesn't talk about male domestic abuse, so men don't bring it up.
Any person can become a victim of abuse. In most cases, women usually commit psychological abuse, constant surveillance, being too emotional or being super jealous in a relationship, not respecting personal boundaries, or checking mobile phone messages, calls and so on is a form of psychological abuse. Or asking to bring money or demanding to buy expensive things is also a form of an economic abuse.
The stereotype that men are the abusers in the vast majority of cases falls in line with the history's treatment of women. Most media plotlines tend to focus on men abusing women. The latest survey shows that in Mongolia, men are 4 to 5 times more at risk of committing suicide. A weak man being abused is uncomfortable. It challenges the false narrative that a real man could stand up to just a weak woman. Another reason why we tend to think about abuse as a purely male-on-female issue is because violence is often depicted being physical and not psychological or emotional. You're watching News Mongolia on MNB World. Now let's take a look at Mongolia's current affairs.
The Speaker of Parliament, Sandy Şatır, is paying an official visit to the Republic of Turkey from October 13th through 17th on the invitation of the President of the Turkish Grand National Assembly, Mustafa Sentop. During his official visit, the Speaker will hold official talks with the President of the Turkiye Grand National Assembly regarding issues of expanding relations and cooperation between the two countries. Moreover, he also pay a courtesy call on the President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and hold meetings with the country's President of the Constitutional Court, Zühtü Arslan, and the President of the Academy of Sciences, Muzaffer Saker.
Now let's take a look at the currency exchange rates provided by Mongol Bank. Now let's take a look at international news from our partner agencies. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is applauding the UN General Assembly after it voted overwhelmingly to condemn Russia's attempted illegal annexation of 4 Ukrainian regions and demand its immediate reversal.
143 countries, including the United States and Mexico, came together to condemn Russia's sham referenda as a clear violation of international law and unequivocally rejected any attempt by Moscow to illegally annex Ukraine's sovereign territory. As much as a condemnation of Moscow, the UN resolution is also a resounding affirmation of global support for everything that President Putin is actually trying to destroy. It's a vote affirming the right of every nation, big and small, to have its sovereignty, its independence, its territorial integrity respected. A vote affirming our shared commitment to upholding the United Nations Charter and international humanitarian law. A vote affirming the human rights of all people, including Ukrainian civilians who continue to suffer barbaric atrocities at the hands of Russian forces. With this vote, the world has never been more united in its repudiation of Russia's war, and President Putin has never been more isolated.
Wednesday's vote at the United Nations is a sign of a strong global opposition to the 7-month war and Moscow's attempt to grab its neighbor's territory. The vote in the 193-member World Body was 143-5 with 35 abstentions. It was the strongest support from the General Assembly for Ukraine and against Russia of the 4 resolutions it has approved since Russian troops invaded Ukraine on February 24th. The Western-sponsored resolution was a response to Russia's announced annexation last month of Ukraine's Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporozhye regions. Moscow acted following Kremlin-orchestrated referendums that the Ukrainian government and the West have dismissed as sham votes conducted on occupied land amid warfare and displacement. Among the surprise supporters of Wednesday's resolution were the yes votes from Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and other members of the Gulf Cooperation Council, as well as Brazil. Among the 35 countries that abstained, 19 were from Africa, including South Africa. China and India, the world's 2 most populous countries, also abstained, along with Pakistan and Cuba. The more powerful Security Council, whose resolutions are legally binding, has been stymied on taking action on Ukraine because of Russia's veto power, which it used on September 29 to block condemnation of Russia's attempts to annex Ukrainian territory. By contrast, the General Assembly, where there are no vetoes, has now approved 4 resolutions criticizing Russia over Ukraine. Its votes reflect world opinion but are not legally binding. The resolution adopted Wednesday declares that Moscow's actions violate Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, are inconsistent with the principles of the United Nations Charter, and have no validity under international law and do not form the basis for any alternation of the status of these regions of Ukraine.
Turkey's parliament passed a contentious bill on Thursday that amends press and social media laws with the stated aim of combating fake news and disinformation. Critics fear that as elections loom, the measure will be used to further crack down on social media and independent reporting.
The 40-article legislation was approved with the votes of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's governing party and its nationalist allies, which together hold a majority in parliament. The vote came following raucous sessions in parliament, which saw opposition legislators clap and shout to disrupt proceedings, hold up signs denouncing what they called the censorship law, and one lawmaker smash a smartphone with a hammer. Amnesty International said after the vote that it was yet another dark day for online freedom of expression and press freedom in Turkey. The most controversial provision, Article 29, mandates up to 3 years in prison for spreading information that is contrary to the truth about Turkey's domestic and international security, public order, and held for the alleged purpose of causing public worry, fear, and panic. Critics warned that social media users could be jailed for posting information the government deems to be fake news. Erdogan argued for a law to combat disinformation and fake news, saying false news and rising digital fascism are national and global security threats. But the wording of the article is so vague that opposition parties say it could be abused by the government and lead to self-censorship in newsrooms. The Republican People's Party has said it will seek the legislation's annulment by taking it to the Constitutional Court. Turkey is scheduled to hold presidential and parliamentary elections in June. İlhan Usta, a legislator from the opposition Good Party, argued that the measures would push Turkey further down the democracy league, while Mahir Unal, a senior ruling party lawmaker, rejected the opposition's claims, saying the legislation doesn't target criticism, the expression of opinions, or information that does not exceed the limits. The law also updates several clauses of Turkey's controversial social media regulations that passed in 2020, which placed requirements on companies like Facebook and Twitter to remove content or face advertisement bans and bandwidth reductions. The law requires social media companies to appoint a representative in Turkey to deal with complaints. The new amendment now requires that the representative be a Turkish national who resides in Turkey. Turkey was rated not free for 2021 on the Freedom of the Net Index by Freedom House. Reporters Without Borders ranked Turkey at 149 out of 180 countries in its World Press Freedom Index.
Now let's take a look at our regular feature on sports. The ball used by Diego Maradona to score two of the most famous goals in football history is to go on auction. The match ball used in the famous 1986 World Cup quarter-final between England and Argentina carries an estimated price of £2.5 million to £3 million.
It is being sold by Ali bin Nasser, the Tunisian referee who allowed Maradona's hand of God goal during the game. The ball was used for the full 90 minutes of the match, which remains one of the most defining and controversial contests in World Cup history. Maradona scored the opener by punching the ball past England goalkeeper Peter Shilton. Bin Nasser did not spot the handball and allowed the goal to stand, with the player later describing it as being a little with the head of Maradona and a little with the hand of the God. Maradona's second strike of the match has become known as the goal of the century, where he dribbled past 5 England outfield players and slotted past Shilton. Argentina went on to win the match 2-1 and eventually win the World Cup in Mexico. The ball is being sold at auction on November 16th as part of a World Cup special event. It will be streamed live and prospective buyers can register their bids online from October 28th. Several items of sporting memorabilia have broken records at auctions recently. The shirt Maradona wore during the 1986 quarterfinal was sold in May for $9.3 million, a new world record. This was beaten just 3 months later when a Mickey Mantle baseball card sold for $12.6 million in August. In September, Michael Jordan's 1998 NBA Finals jersey sold for $10.1 million, a new world record for any game-worn sporting memorabilia.
Mo Salah completed a remarkable hat-trick in just 6 minutes and 12 seconds, the fastest ever in Champions League history, as Liverpool routed Rangers 7-1 at Ibrox Stadium at Glasgow on Wednesday.
Salah, who by his own high standards has had a mixed start to the season, came off the substitute bench in the 68th minute and 7 minutes later started scoring. First he pounced on a loose ball and clinically slotted the ball into the net. Then he fired his second into the goal despite the attentions of 3 Rangers players, and suddenly he was on a hat-trick. And as quickly as Salah had scored his first 2, he completed his third, curling the ball past Rangers goalkeeper Alan McGregor. The result and Salah's performance provides some much-needed relief for Liverpool. A team that came close to winning the quadruple last season has entered its worst start to the domestic season since 2012-2013, so much so that Klopp declared his side's title hopes already over the weekends following a 3-2 defeat by Arsenal.
Special, it's typical Moa. Very important. The whole thing, how the boys adapted to it, to the positions, to the lineup, the reaction of the boys on the pitch. I thought everybody who started tonight played really well. Can't think about one player who didn't have a good game.
Liverpool started poorly in this match and, as so often this season, conceded the first goal, Scott Arfield putting the Scottish side ahead after 17 minutes. A Roberto Firmino header from corner pulled Liverpool level. I thought it needed a block from Liverpool's Ibrahima Konate to prevent Rangers from restoring their lead. After halftime, Liverpool found some rhythm and Firmino extended the visitors' lead with his second goal, latching onto the Joao Gomez cross. 10 minutes later, Darwin Núñez completed a counter-attack after Firmino set up the Uruguayan international with a clever touch. Then after Salah's 6-minute hat-trick, Harvey Elliott scored his first ever Champions League goal, following a nervous VAR wait to complete the 7-1 victory. Liverpool will play next in for Manchester City in the Premier League at Anfield on Sunday.
Now let's take a look at the weather forecast for the world's major cities. Well, that's all for today. Thank you for staying with us. We'll see you next week with more news and updates. Have a nice weekend. Goodbye.